Yeah, I love we're watching your chats. Love the chats. Love to see where you're coming from. Colombia, Greece, North Macedonia, Mauritius, Namibia. Hello, Terry. I also saw Daniel from sunny Jamaica. Daniel, I'm ready. I'm going to get on a plane. I think Natalie will come with me from the cold reaches
I
of Canada and northern US. We're going.
I want to go to Singapore now after seeing that video.
That's going to be amazing. Serbia, Singapore, Philippines, ooh, Bangladesh. Thank you, Daniel. No problem. Yes.
Oh, finally, someone from Toronto.
Toronto. There's always some folks here from Canada. Don't worry. They're gonna cheer you on here. Sri Lanka, Iran, Guatemala. Wow. All right. Well, hello everyone. I'm going to go ahead and kick this off in interest of time. Before we start and before I introduce our guests today, I have to do a big shout out to Natalie, or Natalie, excuse me, to Isla, who is behind the screen there, who's making everything happen. But last month, she's the one who stepped in and did this webcast because I decided it would be more fun to have somebody hit my car and have a concussion. Yes. So, Isla, a huge thank you to you for stepping in last minute and carrying the ball forward. So thank you. And I trust she was amazing. She is amazing. She does so many things to make
Yes.
all of this happen at World Chef. So today we're talking about the world of events. And I was asking, so Isla and I were talking beforehand. This is our 36th episode. That means we've been doing this for over 3 years and we have never talked about events. So this is, yeah, exactly, Natalie, you are it here. So so this is actually something that when we first sort of got in contact with you, I'm like, this is going to be really interesting because those of you who have seen and done the curriculum, you will see that in class number 7, which is all about waste, there is a section in there about events. It's not huge, but we do address it. And so today we're going to dive deep into all things events. And I'm really, really excited. So stay tuned. This is going to be amazing. Don't forget to put your questions in the Q&A. Now let's introduce our guest, Natalie Lowe, who you can see there on the screen. And I'm going to read her bio for all of us here quickly to sort of give us a sense for who's actually joining us. So Natalie owns and operates Celebrate Niagara, a DMC in Niagara, Canada, that is, that just celebrated the 18th year in business. She founded the Sustainable Event Forum in 2018 with a mandate to educate, inspire, collaborate, and act on the climate emergency for event professionals. Kind of sounds like what we do here at Feed the Planet. Anyways, she produces Earth Day for event people every April. Over 850 people have completed her online course, Planet for the Planet. She hosts an online sustainability podcast, Planners for the Planet, and writes on sustainable events for Meetingsnet and Canada special events. Whew, I'm not done. Natalie was introduced in the Canadian Meetings Industry Hall of Fame this past year and has received the Events Industry Council Globe Award for social impact in 2022, the Joy Fox Award for Excellence in Innovation. My goodness, this is amazing. And the Meetings Net Changemaker Award. She was recognized by WWF Canada and the Globe and Mail as Changemaker in Events and Sustainability. She is a subject matter expert, that we're going to find out in a second, thought leader on sustainable events, known for positive energy, which you're going to find out in a second, straightforwardness, and thought leadership. All right, so let's just jump in. First of all, welcome, Natalie. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Oh, pleasure's all mine. Thank you for having me.
So I want to start. We spoke last week, and I just want to start with that story you told me for how you actually got into this.
Right. So I'm from a tiny little town in northern Alberta. It's called Slave Lake. It's on the edge of the largest lake within the province of Alberta. It's not as big as the Great Lakes, but it's a big lake. It would take you about 2 hours to drive the length of it. And in 2011, I was living in Toronto or Niagara here, and my hometown of Slave Lake had a forest fire and it burnt to the ground. Now, what's unusual about this is that it happened in May when it should still be cool and the forest around Slave Lake should be wet. But climate change happened. And so the forest was dry. It was 32 degrees Celsius in northern Alberta in May. It was only 16 degrees here in Niagara, and we're sort of the banana belt of Canada. So it was a bit of a wake up call. And I got involved in helping people get their homes sorted. Uh, it's a huge trauma to lose your home. And so my niece and her husband and their 4 kids, 2 dogs and a cat, lost their home for 3 years until it could be rebuilt. And it really introduced me to the idea that we could affect change, and that we could make a difference. And it was this really neat experience where everyone across Canada was sort of banded together to help these people find temporary lodging, take care of their pets. And the sad thing is, this has now become an every year thing. It's who's going to get the forest fire this year. And so a couple of years after this had happened, I kept thinking about the climate emergency, and I kept thinking somebody should do something, but not a lot of people were, or it didn't seem like in the events industry people were. So I'm like, well, if not me, then who? So what I really aim to do, and it's a little embarrassing to hear. I keep saying no more awards. I don't need them, but I'm good at kind of, I'm not your typical Canadian. I apologize to the Canadians. I'm a little bit of a troublemaker. And so I want to ask the uncomfortable questions. I want to ask, do we need to do this? Do we need to have a system where we overfeed our attendees, where we have so much waste? No, we don't need to have it. So let's change it. So
You
I
know,
am
I
one of those.
go ahead.
Sorry. I get excited by the concept of change, and I'm hoping in my advancing years it will keep me young. But I think our systems around large events and the food at large events, it needs to change.
Okay. So first of all, I love what you said. Climate emergency. Everyone take note of that because we have spent a lot of time talking about climate change. And I think most everybody would sort of recognize that we have now sort of moved past that. And climate emergency, I think, is really the correct term today. So thank you
It, it,
because
it
things,
actually is. The Parliament of Canada recognized actually in 2019 or 2018, that Canada is in the midst of a climate emergency. And I think we were like the 145th country in the world to do so. It is no longer change, it is an emergency.
yes. So let's jump into events because you started sort of mentioning that a little bit. So as you
Yeah.
look at the events industry, and again, you're talking to a bunch of chefs. Many of
Mhm.
us have done events before, work with event
Absolutely.
planners, we execute on it, et cetera, et cetera. Where are the biggest sins that you see in the event world when it comes to sustainability?
Right. When you look at, so I'm going to talk about greenhouse gas emissions because at the end of the day, it's the numbers, right? If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So when we look at the typical event, 80 to 90% of the emissions come from the transportation. So your flight there is a huge contributor. So a flight from Toronto to, say, London return would be about 629 kilograms of what we call CO2 equivalent. So, not much we can do about it. The airline industry is doing everything that they can, and they're working on something that they call SAF, which is Sustainable Aviation Fuel. Some stops and starts, and some interesting things. For example, Air Iceland, or I think it's technically Iceland Air, within the area of Iceland, they're using electric planes, right? And so we're starting to see some of this change. But number two is the food. And so, if we can't change our mode of transportation or it's out of our personal control, the thing that we can control is the food and beverage. And there are two main areas within sort of the realm of food. And we're going to separate it a little bit. There's food and your food choices, and then there's the food waste. And here in North America, we have a bit of a food waste problem. So, groundbreaking study was done in Canada, and I believe the numbers reflect equally in the US. 58% of all food in Canada is destined for landfill. Of that 58%, 32% of it could be used. And so we're starting to have conversations around that. I had a great conversation with a chef from Surrey, BC yesterday, and there was a supply of mandarin oranges, and the oranges couldn't get to the grocery store, or it was an overorder or something. There were all these oranges. Could he go pick them up through his catering company? Can he process that and have it not end up in the landfill? So the United States Environmental Protection Agency actually came up with this really cool thing that I had never heard of, and it's called a food waste hierarchy. And it talks about the best ways to reduce your food waste. You can find it on the internet, but it's on our website as well. And so what we try to do is simply get planners to start thinking about stop over serving people, have less, because we've all seen the waste, right? We've all seen it. So that's kind of where our sins are.
Yeah. So let me just do a quick follow-up on the food part, and then I have some other questions about maybe some other areas that we might want to look at. But when it comes to food, so what you're saying is it's menu selection in terms of what foods we're serving, and it's also how much food we're serving.
Yeah.
So what might be some strategies that chefs could use or think about when let's say they're planning the event with somebody, and how could they maybe direct somebody towards more sustainable choices, and also maybe the understanding that portion sizes need to be looked at. What are your thoughts
Yeah.
on that?
Yeah. Well, it's twofold. We know, so if you look at emissions by protein source, we know that just by going from beef to the next highest emitting protein source would be lamb or mutton. So for 100 grams of beef, it produces, through the lifetime of creating that 100 grams of beef, you're creating 50 kilograms of CO2 emissions. Lamb is about 19.8. I think the World Resource Institute has that. So the idea is you don't have to all go to tofu, right? Here in Canada, it's like if I say to a mostly male audience, if I say, hey, let's reduce our beef consumption, they immediately think I'm going to feed them tofu, which I'm not. But just knowing that really at the end of the day, we have to reduce our beef consumption. So I think we need to be mindful of that. And that's hard to swallow because we have some grasslands in Canada and the US, which are very natural grazing spaces. But they weren't natural grazing spaces for cows, it was buffalo, right? And so we are starting to see, I was just recently in Stockholm and we were at Meatballs for the People, of course. And you could get moose, you could get, I don't think that they have buffalo there, but bear meat. So unusual, interesting, exotic meats. But we have gotten hooked on this, everybody needs to have a hamburger idea. And I do not want to go to your beautiful exotic country and eat, North American food. I want to eat what you have. And so I think we need to open up our attendees' idea. And I think people have gotten a lot more, but it's mostly you have to reduce the beef. Now on reducing it, here's our struggle is that we just need to get over the idea that an empty chafing dish is somehow a failure on the part of the organizer or the chef. Right? And I know most chefs that I've worked with, you're watching to see how full the plates are when they come back. And what we're seeing is people are just putting too much stuff on their plates and then they're not even finishing it. So I think we need to think about, using smaller plates, pacing out the dinners a little bit more, but we're just eating too much. And you all know when we attend, so, I'm looking at this beautiful video of Singapore and I'm looking at the variety of food. And yes, we want to try it all, but could we maybe reduce the portion sizes a little bit?
Really
I can
interesting.
always ask for an extra one if I'm still
Yeah.
hungry. But if you and I are served the same, we just, you and I should not be eating the same. You should have two smaller portions and I should have one. So I think we need to consider that.
So my follow-up is outside of the food part, where else do you see waste maybe that we could look at, or
Yeah,
using resources that maybe there's better ideas for?
yeah,
What
yeah,
are your thoughts? What do you see?
yeah. Well, plastic pollution is a huge problem, right? It's a huge problem. Most of the plastic comes from packaging. So we need to start considering, how is our food packed and brought to us? And what are we using? So I spoke to this interesting chef yesterday, and the baking sheets that we cover with plastic wrap to keep warm, he actually purchased lids for all of them. Now, it was interesting because he runs a catering company, and this is a big complaint that I get from planners who call me and they say, the catering comes and the entire stand is wrapped in plastic. Like, how could this happen? Instead, what this chef has done is he's bought lids for all of them, and now he can actually stack them instead of having to have them all laid out. So I think we need to start asking our suppliers, how can we get away from the plastic use? And just to put it into perspective, they recently did a study of 2,000 women who were pregnant who had levels of plastic toxins in the placenta that were endangering to life. So, I recently presented to a bunch of club managers, so they would be, like your GMs, and they really pushed back and said, well, our straws. I'm like, really? Do you need a straw that bad that you would endanger the life of a child? Like, we need to start thinking about the consequences of our actions.
So let me throw a scenario at you. Ready?
Okay.
You have a bunch of people. They're getting on a bus, okay, and
Yes.
and they're gonna get
A scenario I'm familiar with.
here we go, and so they're gonna get their lunch on the bus, as they drive to some whatever events. And
Mhm.
when I've done this before, when I've been on those buses, what comes to me is everything is in plastic or disposables that maybe are not compostable. They're not, and quite frankly, I watch what happens, and people eat some of it and leave some, and
Mhm.
then eventually everything goes into a big plastic bag and it's taken away. How can we address that?
Right. Well, I think our friends in India kind of figured out how to do hot lunches, or lunches of any variety with reusable dishes, right? Um, a bento box, the stackable tins. Why aren't we using them? So, what I often say is, well, what did your grandmother do or your great grandmother do? Because she didn't have stuff like that, right? And so I remember as a small child watching my mom put coffee for my dad. They farmed during the summertime as kind of a hobby, odd hobby if you ask me, but anyways. And you wrap the silverware in the tea towel because they use it as a napkin. I mean, why did we get away from all of this? So we did a conference recently, and they went out and bought all wooden compostable flatware. I'm like, why? Just use what you have in the kitchen. Put a bin at the end, people walk by and toss their stuff in. Like, when did we get so precious that I, as an event attendee, can't put my silverware into your bin as I'm leaving the bus? Like, so I think we kind of got ahead of ourselves on this, where, we thought it had to be so fancy. And I think we just need to take a step back and think, well, what things can we eat with our hands that we don't need to have all of this wrapping? And I understand the need for, kitchen safe. I've taken the
Sure.
kitchen safe
Yeah,
training
yeah.
and everything else. But I think we kind of got a little bit overboard on, and that especially, please do not buy compostable dishes or cutlery. Most of the time it is not able to be processed where you're purchasing and using it, and it just goes into a landfill. So just use your regular cutlery
Love it.
and sell it as being sustainable.
Yeah, and
And
also
if
sell it as being more high end.
yes, yes, you say,
Yeah,
would the
no, this is
queen use plastic or the king use
yeah.
plastic? It's
I used to have people in the press ask me like, okay, so what's best? I mean, should we get like if we don't use plastic, so should we do compostables? Or and I'm like, no, the solution is always
yeah,
use metal flatware, and the amount
yeah,
of resources it takes to wash and sanitize is nothing compared to making something. All right, so tell me a little
exactly.
bit about the sustainable event forum that you founded,
Right.
and I mean, tell me a little bit of, I guess maybe more about in doing so, you connected with other people in the event space. What have
Yeah.
you learned from that? Are there certain takeaways or maybe things you heard from people that kind of made you go, oh, That's a really good idea.
Yeah, you know what? I think that happens every single day. Um, uh, I, I just learning about the baking sheets, the lids on them. That was exciting, right? Which, okay, I have a little bit of a nerd bent, so I enjoy learning about the science of these things. My great takeaway, though, is that people have convinced themselves that they don't know or understand sustainability. It is completely false. You grew up with it. Your mom did it in the kitchen. Your grandmother did it in the kitchen. So it's not a matter of us trying to figure this out. It's a matter of us going back, right? We lost our way a little bit, right?
Like that.
and and so and I don't know about my grandmother was, she was a force to be reckoned with. And when I think of the things that she did to sort of be smart about how she used food. And right now we're all talking about inflation and how expensive things are, but I see what people are buying and it's just too much. So I think we just need to pull back a little bit. Sustainability is not about buying some new fancy thing. It's about taking care of things. It's about, repairing instead of replacing, except for your refrigerators and your ice boxes. Those, there's better
Yep.
technology. And so in your kitchen, that if you're going to make some steps, that is a key area because of the old chemicals that they used. If you can replace refrigeration systems with modern systems, you will have an immediate reduction of emissions.
Awesome. All right. Two questions. I'm going to get to questions from you guys because I see a bunch coming in here. Just real briefly, tell me a little bit about the Earth Day, that event that you do.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so working in sustainability is like a bit of a drag, right? Like you learn all of this stuff and then you like what yeah, you feel isolated and alone and overwhelmed and it's depressing. So we're party people. Right? Okay, we hate it when you call us party people, but we're kind of party people. Just don't call us that to our face. But we love a good party. So I started Earth Day as a way to have some fun and to celebrate what other people were doing, and also to create a platform where people could connect. I'm like, hey, here's my buddy from Vancouver, meet, my friend, the event planner in South Africa. What can you guys share? Because at the end of the day, this climate emergency is a team sport. We're all going to win or we're all going to lose. So I need to build the team. So Earth Day is always on Earth Day, unless it falls out a weekend. Then we do it the Friday before. We do an hour. It's not really a webinar. It's an hour broadcast. We talk about cool things that are going on. It's always free and it's always virtual. And I'll give Isla the
Beautiful.
login. Lots of event people there, and chefs are welcome.
All right.
You always want a chef at your party.
Absolutely. So speaking of chefs at the party, so we have a lot of chefs, cooks, culinary students from all over the world who have joined us today. And I know that there's probably people who are listening to you saying, "Wow, I wish that in my hotel, resort, whatever, I had a Natalie because we could, because
Oh no,
no,
you
but
don't.
careful what you wish for. No,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
you know, these are, people who are joining us today are joining us because they care and they want to
Right,
learn. This format is all about education for the purpose of inspiration and action.
right.
And so as they're listening to this, there maybe, and I guess my question to you is, what's kind of the strategy that they could talk to their events people about? Hey, I'm really concerned about this sustainability thing, and I wanna maybe work with you. Um, and not that they're going to plan the events, but how could they work with an event planner like you, or maybe not like you, but an event planner to
Yeah.
help them think more sustainably and at the same time not step on too many feet?
Well, event planners and chefs have the same, I'd say, challenge is that we report to somebody who has thoughts and ideas, but at the end of the day, we have to kind of keep our attendees happy. So I think if you want to encourage people to be more sustainable, you have to use inclusion and talk about how can we better utilize our resources? How can we respond to attendees? They say 70% of the population, the global population now rates climate action as their number one fear, right? Or climate fear is sort of a big thing. So you talk about how you're going to make that group happy. If you have someone who is hesitant, and this is what I find in events, is that we're people pleasers generally, right?
Yeah,
We want to keep everybody happy. So you really have to position it as an opportunity for them to do something good for everybody. And if they're not sure where to start, tsef.ca is our website. Under the resources banner, we give our stuff away. This is not how I make my living. This is my, as someone put it, it's the rent I pay for living on the planet, right?
got it.
So they're welcome to take any of the resources. People reach out to me all the time. I try to connect you with people in your area. And if you're on LinkedIn, you'll notice groups that are sort of really into sustainability. Hop in. Like, event people are friendly, chefs are friendly, but chefs and event people who are into sustainability are really friendly. So
Yep, absolutely. So, um,
I'm seeing
let's
lots
see.
of
We
questions.
Yes, we lots of questions here, and I'm gonna try to pick out a couple here. So there's one here. And by the way, thank you all for questions. It's always great. What source is generally available to help us calculate the environmental cost or CO2 emission of the ingredients we are planning to use? Do you have a
Well,
good source you recommend?
what I do is I compare two different sources. I default to the UNFCCC spreadsheet, which does not have a lot of detail on it. But what you can check out is Our World in Data, and they will give you the breakdowns. If you're looking for actual calculators, most of them for a professional use charge a fee. And I'll give Isla a couple of links. Right now I'm using one, but you can only use it to calculate a single recipe. But if you pay for the subscription, it will allow you to put your full recipe in, and then it tells you exactly what the carbon emissions are for that particular recipe based on weight and measurement. But you have to know that just by removing the beef off your menu, you've immediately dropped it.
Yep,
I
excellent.
know. I always say the cows pay me
Yeah,
to tell you guys to eat more chicken
yeah.
and fish.
Why does our industry throw away food instead of giving it to the homeless?
Well, it depends on where you're from, but there seems to be this misconception. So if you go, and again, I'm not toting our word, there's nothing on my website I'm selling you, but if you go to tsef.ca under the resources, we list all of the Canadian and the American legislation that protects you as a food donor. But that's what came from it, is because in North America, we tend to be a little bit litigious. The hotel companies and the convention centers got worried about if they gave food away and someone got ill, would they be liable?
Right.
There's legislation in place that protects you. As long as you are responsible on your end, you are covered. So I think we need to get over that idea. And that's really reducing the amount of food waste that you have is the first step. The second step is, yeah, give it to people. Now, my friend Ben Leegee in BC, all he works on is food waste. And he would tell you there's kitchen waste, there's leftovers, and then there's plate waste. But even plate waste can be given to animal farms to use instead of going in. We talk about composting a lot, but there's not a huge savings of emissions. Once you hit composting, you are still creating emissions. It's not the most efficient use. It should, just like we say, reduce, reuse, recycle needs to be used in order. It's the same thing, right? Don't do your recipe out of order. You won't get the right results. So you have to reduce your food waste, give it to people. I know a lot of you let your staff use it, and that's fine as long as somebody's eating it, then animals, then composting, and then finally into landfill.
All right. We're like out of time, and I'm going to go over just a couple minutes. So hopefully everybody bears with me. There was a comment here that I'm just going to read. It's as of March
Yeah,
1st, Toronto is implementing bylaws for prepared food delivery businesses to offer the option of not supplying single-use utensils, which I just thought was kind of an interesting thing.
right.
Um, there's a question here, and this is probably a long question to answer, but I'm going to ask you to answer it really fast. How can we
Okay.
constrict the larger producers regarding the wastage of food? Also should they be doing more to implement, to reduce plastics and their
Yeah.
CO2 footprint? How can we implement that? We buy from these big companies, etc.
Right, right. Well, they know that you're asking, but the thing is, so what we found within sort of the ecosystem of sustainability, within events, within sort of food service, is those larger companies aren't offering and we're not asking. So, it's like that person that you had a crush on in grade 8, right? You were 13, you were too shy to ask. You got to ask. So, I need all of you to start asking your food service companies, can we reduce the packaging on this? Because I come from a corporate background, and what I will tell you is we listen to what our clients are telling us. And when they start asking, so we're on a bit of a push, and you'll see under that resources section where we ask event planners to put into their RFP questions on sustainability. We ask about square footage, we ask about the menu, we ask about all of these questions about your venue. But now we're asking you, what steps are you taking towards sustainability? And how are you sort of managing that?
I love it.
So ask.
Yes. Well, and that's what we talk about all the time on this webcast, which is the power of the white jacket. Chefs, you have power.
Yes.
Exercise it. We have buying power. Exercise it. Make your voice known. Be a little bit of a pain like Natalie has learned to do.
I,
um,
I hope I'm a big pain at this point, but
I was trying to be polite.
absolutely.
And we're going to wrap up here. There was three things happening in the chat that I thought were pretty interesting. One was a question about, what, all people want here is beef and fish, beef and fish, beef and fish. And I think the quick
Mhm.
answer to that is part of our job as chefs is to and event planners is to entice people, I think, with offerings that are interesting, not just like, do you
I
want chicken instead? Give it
I'm
something
going
fascinating.
Yes, I'm going through that exactly right now. So I'm doing 3 programs in the month of April, and we have put out to 5 different caterers in Toronto, and they want a fully vegan meal. All 3 of these clients have agreed. I may have had some influence there. The problem that we're struggling with is that the vegan options really don't sound great, right? Like there's only so many ways that you can serve cauliflower steak. So I think we need to get a lot more. And every chef I know loves vegetables, right? Who doesn't love vegetables? So I think we need to get more comfortable with how we're serving it. I did an event, it was 100 meeting planners, and our highest feedback came from it was a curry based meal that we served for lunch that was completely vegan, got the highest feedback. But it was creative, it was interesting, there were things on the plate. Now these people have not seen the meal yet, they're just reading it. So I think we need to work on making our options a little bit more interesting. And my background is in dietetic sciences, so I'm just going to put in here, we need to think outside the, you know, 4 main areas of protein, right? You can get amino acids from a combination. And I think we need to start talking about those combinations. And our friends from different ethnic countries can really help us with that. We all love the variety and spice and the taste. So, go for it. Start offering unusual things. As for the person who asked how to cook bear, just don't. That's my advice to you. Leave the bear alone.
There's
It's,
a
yeah,
whole separate chat going on around bear meat. Just
around the
saying.
bear. Just don't.
So so I was going to talk about that. No, this is and just one thing I'll add on to that. When we're selling a client on options, to your point, sometimes saying, whatever, cauliflower steak may not sound interesting, but my experience is if you actually show them the dish, they kind of go, oh, well, this is really good. Let's do
Yeah.
that. And it's so much more
Yeah.
interesting than do you want salmon or filet? So
Well,
anyway,
and vegans love mushrooms, but it's yeah. I've had lion's mane steak that was, and I'm like a red meat eater from Alberta, Canada. Like we're like Texas, guns, oil, and cows, right? And so I loved the lion's mane steak. It was delicious. It was beautifully prepared. I understand it's difficult to do at scale. So that's where you chefs were relying on your expertise. Help us out here.
we can do it. With that,
Okay.
I'm going to have to wrap up because we're way over and there's
We are
still so
way
many
over.
interesting questions. But Natalie, first of all, a gigantic thank you to you. This has
Mm.
been really, I think, engaging, thought-provoking, and just from the number of questions and what I'm seeing in the chat, I think we've gotten a lot of people thinking about some things. So thank you, thank you. We will put your resources up there for others to, those of you who are joining us to check out later. A huge thank you to everybody who's taken their time. Time is a precious gift, and you gave us part of your life today. Hopefully, you walk away from this inspired and ready to do more and think about how we can change the world with the power of the white jacket. A gigantic thank you to Isla, who's hiding there behind the curtain. Thank you for making everything happen there in Paris at the World Chef's office. And once again, Natalie, a huge thank you.
My pleasure.
I will see all of you next month. And in the meantime, keep fighting the good fight. Thanks.